I think what it is in everything bad, there's still a little bit of good. Like no matter what it is. You just got to find that good, because without that, you're defeated, right?
When you and I spoke on the phone, one thing that I picked up on you right away is you have an amazing mindset, and you spoke a lot about mindset.
I mean, the mindset was shocked to be like, okay, we're here. Like, are we going to start getting machine gun fire, mortar fire? Like, so I feel like with my mind, I'm always thinking of sometimes ridiculous things. But at the same time, like if you think of something ridiculous that might happen and it happens, you're not going to be surprised. So kind of like picture the worst situation and then see what happens from there, right? Like if you picture the worst thing and you think about how you can get out of it, you're already a step ahead. And then 2019, I went to Mount Everest base camp.
Wow. With like lung resections, the whole thing. Wow.
That was tough. So I did.
What is that? 17,000?
Yeah, it's like over 17.6 or something.
Yeah.
But I went with a buddy on the SWAT team and his son, who's
So you hiked into base camp?
Yeah, we
Did
hiked.
it take it like a week?
Yeah, I think it was 6 days. So we went to Kathmandu for a couple of days, and we did the long trek. We did kind of went counterclockwise. Some people go to base camp, and he said, "Oh, it's a 197-mile bicycle ride from Sturbridge, Massachusetts, all the way to Provincetown in 2 days, and it raises money for Dana Farber." I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to go on his team, even though he offered. No, there's Team Shaman, which is a big team, and I was like, I want this to be my thing. So sitting in the cruiser, and I'm trying to think of names, and I'm like, and then it just came to me, Thin Blue Ride, Thin Blue Line for cops, ride because we're riding bikes. I'm like, that's awesome.
Love the name.
Yeah.
Absolutely love the name.
And I'm like, I never come up with good names, so I came up with that. I'm like, I love it.
Welcome to the Apex Lifestyles Podcast. I'm your host, Bob GDMD, and here, as always, with my co-host,
Dennis V. What's going on today, Bob?
Hey, you know what? We have an amazing week this week, man.
This week's going to be fire.
It's going to be busy week.
Straight from Mexico. The Becoming Undeniable Challenge. The winner is coming from Mexico. Can you believe that it was worldwide?
Yeah, unbelievable. Alejandra's coming up. Alejandra Sanchez is coming up. She's going to spend 4 or 5 days with us. We're going to redo her smile. We're going to take her to Gym Hub and have Nate and Jose put her through the ringer. And then at the end of that, we're going to top it off with a Nita Strauss show.
That's going to be great.
It's going to be a great time, man. And it's all planned. I can't wait to see it. And by the time this is aired, it's already going to have happened. But we'll already probably have some reels up regarding that. So stay tuned for that.
Fun week.
Right? And I just want to thank everybody for subscribing and watching and coming out. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you get notified when new drops come through. And we love to have you guys on. We answer all of the... we personally answer every single comment in there, too. So if you leave a comment, hit subscribed. We'll make sure that you enter our monthly contest for some free merch. And from Dennis and I, and we'd love to see you in the community. So with that, Dennis, we got a great guest here today.
It doesn't get any better than this. JD Daige, born and raised in Leicester, Massachusetts, high school football player. Right after 9/11, signed up for the Army Reserves, National Guard Reserves. Did 2 tours in Iraq, 18-year veteran Worcester police officer, and you see how chiseled this guy is, how positive, how physically fit. And when you, through this podcast, when you hear the story of resilience, is he has battled cancer over and over and over again, and has an amazing charity out now called Thin Blue Ride that he spearheaded, and he's killing it. We are honored to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so
Welcome,
much
JD.
for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, man. What a story. So we're the Apex Lifestyles Podcast. We talk about people reaching their apex, whatever that is. And we've learned that some high performers in the world have always ended up with obstacles along the way. And those obstacles seem to be the crucible by which greatness is obtained. So you've had your share of that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's always been some obstacles which I thought were some minor obstacles, and then all of a sudden there are bigger obstacles, and then standing back, listening to what people said, I'm like, all right, those are pretty substantial.
Yeah, for sure. Like we're gonna get all into it, but you have a compelling story, man.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm looking forward to digging in. So let's start. High school, Leicester, Massachusetts,
Yep.
defensive end, right?
Yep.
And fit guy, right?
Yeah, football was it was not something that came natural. I had to work hard for it. This guy, Lev Cacciadorian, he's between Spencer and Leicester, right on the line. He would train kids in the summer, and it was like one of those Rocky movies, chasing chickens, pulling telephone pole logs.
I love the chasing chickens
Like
thing, man.
literally, it was nuts.
That's how we used to train in the old days. Right?
I went from one of like the slowest kids on the team to finishing as one of the fastest kids. I was working for my father full time. I would go to his camp all summer, and a lot of the kids, it was great because a lot of the Leicester kids went, a lot of the Spencer kids went, and we were rivals. But growing up, we played like Pop Warner together, so we were going through this this suck of a practice, but it was something that everyone chose to do. It wasn't mandatory, and that was one of those things where he was like an inspirational guy. He would never yell. He'd be like, JD, you're a defensive end. You're an animal. And then he'd go to, Dean, you're a great running back. But he'd just like motivate you. And that's what the initial thing that helped me get through the military is thinking about like the football stuff.
Yeah.
And then, from there.
Yeah, that mental toughness was instilled early.
Yeah.
Through those camps, I would assume, right?
Yeah, definitely. It was, you put in the effort and, sweat now so you don't have to bleed later type thing.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, you weren't delivering papers or for a full-time job. You were a welder.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that you're doing a 40-hour welding job in the week, and then you're doing those workouts.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah, I learned a lot working the family business, doing metal fabrication and stuff. It was fun to do. You'd walk up to a foundation, and then end of the day, end of the week, you'd walk away and you'd have this steel structure up. You're like, oh, this is pretty cool. A sense of accomplishment.
Cool.
And it helped with a lot of things with, being on time as much as I was not on time for my dad's business.
Yeah.
And, and then.
No nepotism
Yeah,
there,
exactly.
right?
Having to be somewhere you say you're going to be. I learned a lot. It was great.
Yeah, so I can imagine that, doing the football camps, playing football, working for your dad, all sounds like physical stuff, right?
Yeah.
And with that goes some mental fortitude that gets put in there early.
Yeah.
So Dennis and I wrote a book. It's right in front of you, Becoming Undeniable. And one of the chapters in there is about mental toughness, and we explored that in detail. And one of the times Dennis is asking me while we're writing that chapter, he goes, "So what do you think your mental toughness came from?" And, it came down to, very early on in its upbringing. I think it's either you're built that way from the beginning, or you end up with a challenge that produces that for you, but you definitely need to have that challenge in order to build mental toughness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of lays the framework for, let's fast forward to, 9/11, 2001, right? What were you doing on that day? Everybody remembers what they were doing. What were you doing?
So some days I'd be on the road working at the shop, or I'd be in the shop and we'd, get steel off the trucks and we'd put it in the big saw and we'd measure and cut. Kind of a mundane, like part of the not the best part of the job, but just sitting there. I remember sitting in front of the saw, cutting these I-beams. And then, it was a waiting period. And then all of a sudden my aunt came out and was like, hey, put on the radio. And then it was, 9/11 happened, like tower, a little, confusion.
Yep.
And we didn't have a TV there. So I remember around lunchtime going to get lunch and seeing in the pizza shop that they had of course, they keep replaying the planes hitting the towers.
Yeah.
And from there, I was like, I think 2 days later, I went to the recruiter. Initially, I thought about going active duty. I'm like, you know what? If this is not something I like, then it's going to be really tough to get out of.
So let's back up. So you were inspired, so to speak, by 9/11 to say maybe I got to go and do something for the country.
Yeah.
And maybe help secure the future for the country and for my family, things like that. Is that how that went down in your head? How did that?
Yeah, I always grew up driven towards the police military drive of like there's something greater than you.
Yeah.
Like football, how did you do during the game? I didn't do that well, but the team won. Okay, so let's figure out like what some improvements we could do. So it's an individual sport as well as it's a team sport. So I kind of look at it like this is our country. We have to protect it. This is a voluntary thing. Like we have a volunteer military. As much as people say, complain about being in service sometimes, or they think it's the only out. It's a volunteer army. It's a volunteer Marine. It's like our armed services are all volunteer, which I think is great about this country because we have people who want to be there.
Yep.
When they're deployed overseas or stationed wherever. So I took that as like, okay, green light, let's go. And initially,
how old were you at this point?
18.
18.
Yeah. So initially I was like, all right, I don't want to go active duty right away because if there's no turning back. If I go reserve, I have the opportunity to go active if I like it. So I'm like, all right, let's dip my toes in. Went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and there was typically, it's not like the movies. You don't get on a bus and then jump right into basic. There's paperwork, there's getting issued gear. So we had this reception that lasted like 2 weeks. Typically it's a couple days, but it takes a little longer. Plus we were non-combat, so we weren't pushed. We were kind of held back with, truck drivers, 52 Deltas, like generator repair, all the other support jobs. So once those 2 weeks, and it was just it was the worst, just waiting around, not doing Army stuff. You're not you don't have the freedom, but you're not into it. So it was tough. But as soon as basic started, then it was like, wait, I'm getting paid to run around and shoot guns and learn all this cool stuff. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So, I thrived in that. I'm not a good test taker. I never had good grades in high school. And, this was like, all right, take apart this gun, put it back together, do it 20 times. Okay, now do it again. Now run 2 miles. So I thrived in that. I enjoyed it, and I did well. So once that was done, I went in to be a truck driver because I thought driving Army trucks would be cool. Maybe could carry that on to the family business with driving some vehicles. And when I got back to work with my father, I was taking some criminal justice classes at Quinn State Community College because I wanted to be a police officer at some point. And I also knew I needed to have that veteran status to probably get picked because those test grades weren't going to be 100. So after that summer went on, it was a little more, I want to say January, we get a phone call like, hey, show up to the unit. And once I was attached to a 325th Brockton transportation unit out of Brockton, Mass. And that was a POL unit. So they transported jet fuel, JP8 diesel fuel. So we get a call, hey, show up to the unit, bring all your stuff. So we knew we were getting deployed. They ended up shipping us to Fort Drum in January.
God, it's
so
cold.
right? I mean, the Army tries to be efficient and cheap, so they weren't sending us to the desert to get ready for Iraq. They sent us to Fort Drum. We were there for 2.5 months. It was so cold. The fuel in the trucks were freezing, so we had to keep they were gelling up. It was so cold. I remember doing like PT runs with our desert goggles on because it was snowing so bad. And then fast forward to March 24th, we take civilian flight because there were so many soldiers getting deployed. It was more efficient to rent out commercial airlines with stewardesses and stuff. It wasn't like hopping in the C5s or so we land in Germany, then take a hop right over to Kuwait, and as soon as we're grabbing our gear off the plane, where some people are getting off, and we could just feel that heat coming in off the door, like 120 degrees with, probably 100% humidity in Kuwait with the Persian Gulf there. And we hear lightning, lightning, lightning. And we're all looking at each other like, what the heck is lightning? And chemical attacks were a big fear. So we did a lot of training on that. And we see the soldiers who were already on base, they start donning their masks. And we're like,
wow. You're like, it just got real.
This just got real. So I remember putting a mask on, and then you go to run to a bunker, which is, you just find one of the bunkers. And I remember going to one bunker, and it looked a little full, and it was a Brit who was right. He's like, "There's no room in here, mate," and he shuts the door on us. So we go to find another bunker, and then get into a bunker, and then you're supposed to put your J's list or your chemical suit on, and basically it's kind of like a winter outfit. It's just we had OD green camouflage, not desert, so it was super hot. Throw those on, and then you're waiting, and then they gave us bottles of water. And with the pro masks, there's a little straw that you can grab with your tongue, and you hook a canteen to it, kind of like a Camelback. And we didn't have canteens; we just had bottles of water. And we're like, "It's so hot," and we're like, "We can't even drink out of these things right now." So it was kind of like, okay, this is the day one.
That's reality.
You know?
So it hit you right in the face. You get off the plane, it hits you right in the face.
Yeah, it was interesting. And then there was a little lag time between realizing what we were going to do. I think the 2.5 month wait in Fort Drum, we were supposed to go to Turkey initially, but then Turkey didn't want soldiers there. So I think they were trying to figure out what they wanted to do with us. So they sent us to Kuwait, which in turn they would send us up to Iraq from the southern border. So from there, some of these guys in the company were like, our company commander, a few first sergeants were like, "Hey," well, one of the first sergeants was like, "We need some volunteers to go up to Iraq." And I'm like, "Well, this is what I came here for. Like, let's go." Me and my buddy Lyd, there was, I don't know how many guys, but however many guys you could fit in the back of a 5-ton, add like 5 to 10 more guys, and that's how many guys went. No canopy on the 5-ton, so the sun was just beating on us, and we had our rucksacks like hanging over the outside because there was no room, and we were just driving up through Kuwait, and then we get to the border, and we see all these soldiers like taking off their chemical suits, and we're like, "Oh, we take off the chemical suits when we leave Kuwait, so that makes it nice."
Yeah.
Then we start going through looked like the DMZ. There was some tanks kind of hidden in the desert. Then there was like a big, kind of like a trench, some fencing, some barbed wire, and a small village that we'd go through. And then we could see some like burnt vehicles. Drive up a couple hours north.
So like a scene out of Mad Max.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was just like, okay, so this is Iraq. Like, what's going to happen next? And then it's, you think it's like, hey, if you were going to drive to Iraq, it'd be super scary, or like, but you're like, all right, as soon as you see something, it's kind of like, I don't know, upward extinction. Like you see it, and then you're like, all right, on to the next, and then okay, on to the next. So see some burning vehicles, go through some more, see some more stuff blown up, and then a couple hours north, we got into where the Highway of Death. That's when in the Gulf War, the planes shot at all the Iraqi vehicles, all the soldiers coming. I'm not sure exactly of the dynamic of how it happened, but it was all these vehicles on the side of the road in Iraq that are all blown up, burnt, and they just pushed them off the side of the road. So we were driving by that, and it was like, oh, this is what they were talking about.
Wow.
What was going through your mind? Because one thing that stands out is you're there to do what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
But what's going through your mind as you're going through? Because when you and I spoke on the phone, one thing that I picked up on you right away is you have an amazing mindset. And you spoke a lot about mindset.
Yeah.
What was going on?
I mean, the mindset was shocked to be like, okay, we're here. Like, are we going to start getting machine gun fire, mortar fire? Like, so I feel like with my mind, I'm always thinking of sometimes ridiculous things. But at the same time, like if you think of something ridiculous that might happen and it happens, you're not going to be surprised. So kind of like picture the worst situation and then see what happens from there, right? Like if you picture the worst thing and you think about how you can get out of it, you're already a step ahead of the game. Like I told one of the guys that we helped out with our nonprofit that I was like, look, we went to war expecting to get PTSD and expecting to see traumatic things, right? Like you name it, you're probably going to see it in war. But then you have, a kid in the city or outside of the building right now who gets in a car accident. like they're not expecting to see these traumatic things. So when you go to war, it's more like, okay, we're gonna see some crazy stuff. So you're preparing for it. Whereas if somebody's here, something horrible happens, like they're not ready for that. And I think part of being a soldier is figuring out like how you can navigate through stressful situations. So the whole time it would be, okay, if this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens, if we get shot at, I'm going to put my gun over the side and start shooting over here. Or if this happens, I'm going to get out of the truck. And so it's always keeping the mind going. And I think I kind of have a creative mind, so I think that helps with the creativity of things, whether it's chaos or whether it's
you can imagine the chaos and
exactly
play it out in your head a little bit. Yeah.
And you're talking a year or two before you're on a football field.
Yeah.
You're senior in high school. You were 19, 20 when you were over in Iraq?
Yeah, I think I was 20 years old, 18 when I signed up, and then 20 on deployment. So I know it was because when I got back in December, I had to wait a couple months till before I could have a beer. I'm like, wait, I could be a combat veteran and I can't have a beer.
Yeah, that's the age-old argument, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, so I mean, so you went and you did a couple of tours in Iraq.
Yeah.
Right. And most people would say that's pretty hard, thing to go through, but you had something even harder when you got home to go through, right? So take us through your last, when you come home and repatriate into like kind of normal civilian life again after your last tour over there. Take us there and take us to what life looked like then.
So was deployed in 2003 for about 10 months, came home, volunteered for my second deployment. And the reason behind that was I didn't tell my parents because they would have lost their mind. But in the reserves, every 4 years you were going to get deployed. So I still had time on my contract. I had a 6x2 contract, so 6 years of drilling and then 2 years in active reserve. So basically I'm like, if I don't go now, I'm going to have to go again in a couple of years. So I, volunteered, and it was basically all the guys I went with the first time and some new guys, which was a bonus. I'm like, I'd rather go with guys I already went with, which was great. Did another 10-month deployment, came home, started working for my dad again, doing steel work. And then it was right into the police academy, which, was a little harder because I wish it was more like the military where it's like, oh, you messed up, do push-ups and run. Where the police academy it was like, all right, what's the, definition of probable cause, every word, And I had a hard time with that. And then my dad made a good point. He's like, you never studied. And I'm like, yeah, even in high school, I took video 1, video 2, school, like gym class, like ridiculous classes in high school, just enough to, get by. But it was, the academy was tough. Mentally, it was just a lot. It took me a lot more than, some other guys. So, yeah, and then getting on the police department, that was, that was a lot of fun. I was a cop, got on in the spring of 2007. And then 2012, that's when I had some groin pain, which I thought was due to a hernia. When I was in Iraq in 2003, I had a hernia. Wasn't diagnosed. It was ingroinal hernia where the intestine wall breaks and drops to your scrotum. So it was like very painful. I came home, had surgery for that, got deployed again. So fast forward to 2012. I thought I had a hernia because I'm lifting weights, I'm trying to get ready for the SWAT tryouts. It was like a 2-day tryout for the city, and went to the doctor, went to the ER, and I thought it was, Googling a ton of things. Like it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. It wasn't any of those. It was, hey, you have a growth on your testicle. And I'm like, wait, by growth, do you mean tumor? They're like, yeah, you have testicular cancer. We're going to do the biopsy. Have surgery next week, do the biopsy.
Wow.
And then, sitting there, how many times have you gone to the ER or the doctors by yourself? Like a bunch.
Yep.
And then to all of a sudden sit and have the doctor be like, yeah, you got cancer, come back next week. And, his bedside manner wasn't all that great, but he was a decent surgeon.
Yeah.
But it was all like, yeah, you got cancer. It's Friday. Come back next week. And I'm like, I have a lot of questions. I don't know what to say. Like, I gotta call my parents. Like, there's a lot to take in. And more research that I did was like, hey, it's very common between 16 and 29 years old. And I was like, oh, I was almost there. I was, 29 years old when I got diagnosed. So it was, quick surgery. And then on the police department, they had me like behind a desk for a bit. After my recovery, it was like maybe a month or two behind the desk, answering phones, that kind of stuff. And then I had swollen lymph nodes. After scans, they were like, hey, your lymph nodes are swollen. So I opted to have a lymph node dissection, which was...
That's pretty invasive.
Yeah, they turn you into a human canoe and take the lymph nodes out and put everything back in. So the reason why I didn't want to not have that surgery is because it could have grown to a teratoma, which is like, it sounds disgusting. It's like cartilage, bone, hair, basically it could grow to something the size of a football.
Yeah, conglomerate of different tissue.
So I'm like, well, I don't want that to happen, so let's just take care of it, That was a 6-month recovery.
And was that a metastasis from the original?
No, it wasn't considered that. It was, the lymph nodes were swollen a certain amount where it was like on the line. So the the urologist said you could have it or you cannot have it. And I'm like, I want to have it. Just, I don't want to have any other issues in the future. Little did I know.
Yeah. So
I had that surgery, 6-month recovery. Then I was back to work on the street, working out a lot. Then another SWAT tryout was coming up. Usually I did it every 3 years or so. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I've always wanted to be on the SWAT team, most trained, in best shape. Like, you get to do some cool stuff. So I remember pushing the sled. Me and a couple other buddies were working out together, motivate each other, and coughed up blood. I'm like, all right, that was probably like a Monday. And then
at that point, were you just thinking like, maybe I pushed too hard? My deadlift was too heavy or something like that?
I remember it was winter. I think it was February or March. And I'm like, it's cold out. It's dry inside. If you ever had a bloody nose inside, it's like because of the dry air. I'm like, maybe I had a bloody nose and I swallowed it and like spit it up or something. Like, hacked it up, whatever. And then day 2, like, spit out some blood. I'm like, huh. I'm like, all right, that's peculiar. And then, after 3rd day, 4th day, 5th day, after 5 days of coughing up blood, I'm like, all right, I should get this checked out.
Yeah.
So I went to St. V's in Worcester, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I went, they did some blood work, which they did a blood draw for tumor markers, and my elevated tumor markers were alpha fetoproteins.
Yeah.
So then they did a chest x-ray, and they found 6 tumors in my chest and lungs.
Wow.
So I had one pushing on my jugular, another one on my stomach, a couple on my lungs. And I was losing weight, and that's on par for me with working out and running a lot and keeping a clean diet. But it was like, all right, I'm not eating that clean. So, that was one of those factors that I was like, oh, that's a little suspect, but let's just push it to the side because, nobody wants to know anything's wrong with them. So in retrospect, I'm like, oh, I was losing weight and I wasn't, eating super clean. I was, working out enough, but whatever. 6 tumors in the chest and lungs, went to St. V's, and then I heard from some friends, like, go to Dana Farber in Boston. So I set up an appointment for a second opinion, which I recommend. Get a second opinion, get a third opinion, get a fourth opinion, because, you have the human error factor. You have a lot of things in play of, like, talking to these doctors, like, hey, you have this. And then you could be a doctor and say you have something totally different or a different treatment option. So St. V's wanted to do chemo in 2 weeks from when I get diagnosed with the tumors in my lungs. I went to Dana Farber and I met Dr. Chris Sweeney, and he said, you're not leaving. You have like stage 4 cancer.
Wow.
So
did you understand what that meant at that time?
So initially I knew it was serious when I couldn't leave.
Yeah, right.
So my thing was, he actually said it's because it metastasized, it's not considered a stage, but he's like, this is like stage 4. Like, this isn't good. And I think what helped for insurance reasons is, sorry, what helped for insurance reasons is if you want a second opinion and your insurance doesn't cover it, you could ask your primary care for an out-of-network visit, which means I asked for an out-of-network visit because Dana Farber wasn't on my plan. I went to visit Dana Farber. They didn't let me leave, so that was still considered my one visit. So I think that was helping me on top of the severity of it, of the tumors. So I stayed overnight, and then the next day I was hooked up to chemo for 8 hours. So I had 3 different types of chemo, like super aggressive. I know Bleomycin was one of them, and that's one that Lance Armstrong decided not to take because of the long-term lung effects.
Cisplatin.
Yeah, cisplatin, and I forget the other one, but it was the whole process of me getting the chemo treatment was 8 hours. So I had to stay in the hospital. I was hooked up 8 hours a day, and I was there for 5 days. And then I would go home for 2 weeks, and then I would go back and get hooked up for 8 hours and 5 days, and then I'd go home. So every time I went, I would get the treatment really early in the morning, like 1 or 2 in the morning. And then they were able to push it back a couple hours every day. So then by the time I left on Wednesday, but I think I would go Wednesday and go home Sunday. So by Sunday, I would be finished my chemo in the morning, and then I'd be able to get discharged at like noontime or 1 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
And the first time I was in the hospital room, I think I saw a bike, like a stationary bike in somebody else's room. And I was like, could I get a bike in my room? I'm like, I'm going to be there for 5 days. I'm going to go nuts if I'm just stuck in there. And they're like, yeah, we could get you a bike in your room. So then I had a stationary bike brought up to my room. And I was the only person in there because I was immune compromised as well, which was nice because I had the room to myself. Like, you don't want to be stuck there for 5 days with somebody else having trouble sleeping and coughing and getting sick.
So all you had to do was heal and get on a Peloton, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and just thinking real quick, first of all, props to you in the advice that you're giving to people by going to get that second opinion. But the other way, whenever you talk about your mindset, you're taking 2 steps forward and you're continuously getting pushed back.
Yeah.
How did that weigh in you? Because it's like you see your goal right there a couple times.
Yeah.
And you just get moved away from it. How are you balancing that out?
So I think it was always, like, and I always said there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, it was never, you get 6 tumors in your lungs, like, you're terminal. We don't know what we're going to do. And I know some people get that diagnosis and it sucks. Like, I have a hard time talking to people that are diagnosed, that are terminal, that I'm trying to help because it's like, you know, they're terminal. It could be whether it's a 6-month or a 3-year or a 3-month, like, you know, like it's weird too, because even when people would approach me, some people would be weirded out because, you know, then their buddy's like sick with cancer. They're like, I don't know what to say. For me, I always try to say, like, how's today going? Because it's like, hey, how's it going? Like, I get terminal cancer. That's how it's going.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, how's today going? Like,
that frames it in a much different way.
It's like, how are you today? Like, your day might really suck, but if you could get up and walk down the hall, that could be your marathon that you're, like, super pumped about. For me, it was always back to that light at the end of the tunnel. It was never like, this is doom and gloom. Like, you have 6 tumors in your chest and lungs. We're going to do chemo, and then you're going to get better. It's going to shrink the tumors. I'm like, all right, cool. Next.
Roger that.
Yeah. And, and it was the chemo. It was not fun at all. Like, I couldn't sleep. I had a bad aluminum taste in my mouth. And I'm always wary of, like, explaining chemo to other people because everyone's cancer. It's like being a veteran or a cop. Like, you know, vets get along with vets. Like, hey, you've been through the same stuff. It's all relative, but there's some little differences, right? Like, my chemo is my chemo treatment could be different than somebody else going through the same thing. Everyone's body's different. Everyone's treatment is a little different. So I'm always cognizant of trying to be like, chemo is the worst, right? It sucked for me. I didn't like it. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't, I had chemo brain. Like, I would tell people the same story over and over. They probably thought I was nuts. But then, somebody else could have the same thing and not have any of those symptoms.
So let me ask you. So you went through chemo, and you were a pretty fit guy at the time. You were training to become, to get on the SWAT team and all this. How much do you think your level of fitness and level of muscle mass that you had contributed to a positive outcome, or getting through that, I'd say?
So, well, I'll backtrack to the lymph node dissection, because my urologist was like, "Oh, it's too bad that you're so fit." And if you're listening, I'm not that fit, but but like the urologist is like, it's harder for muscle to heal than it is for, like, if you were more fat.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, well, I wish I was fat, because I have a scar from the top of my belt line to the bottom of my sternum, and it was and it's the hard tissue, once it heals, like it's tough, and I've got scars all over to prove that. Like, it's a tough process with the healing, but I think being fit helped going through that initially, because I'm literally in a hospital room for 5 days. So what can you do? Like, get a bike, like, try and do that. I didn't, I actually, and it's funny because I wasn't into cycling then, but I just knew it was
something to do.
Yeah. It was funny. The first day that I was in my room, I was trying to open the window, and a nurse came in, and she's like, "Excuse me, sir, can I help you with something?" And I think she thought I was trying to jump, because I was trying to I was on like the 12th floor or something. I'm like, "No, I'm just trying to open the window." She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just want to, like, get some air." Yeah. I'm like, I wouldn't be here for 5 days if I'm going to try and jump out of the window.
Just a psych consult, right?
But yeah, I thought that was funny. I'm like, I wouldn't be here. Like, I would have jumped somewhere else if I wanted to.
Yeah, right. Not at the hospital where they can.
But, yeah.
Right. I got you. All right. So cool. So we've gotten through chemo.
Mm-hmm.
You do some scans, and did we have some regression of those tumors?
So the tumor shrunk, and what happened was it caused scarring on the lungs. So your right lung is made up of 3 lobes, top, middle, bottom. Left lung is 2, because your heart takes up that area. So I met with a lung surgeon, and he was great. I said, "Look, I'm an athlete. Like, I'm not a paid athlete, but I like to work out. So could you not, like, take my whole lung?" Because what they do is they pretty much put you on your side, deflate your lung, operate on it, take the sections of the lung out, put you back together, lung fills up, and then you're back. I was nervous he was going to take the whole lung, and I was like, "Please, like, what's my 2-mile run going to be if you take my lung out?" He's like, "I got a bunch of 80-year-olds with COPD in the waiting room. Like, I'm not, I'm not telling you anything." So he ended up turning a 3-hour surgery. He took the top lobe and the bottom lobe of my right lung, and he, like, reconstructed a blood vessel, and was on the phone with another doctor from, I don't know, like, Germany or something. And when he was finished, I was up in the recovery room, and he came in, like, all excited. He's like, "So how are you feeling?" I'm like, "My left side hurts," because it was a right lung resection. So I was, like, on my left side for 6 hours. But he's like, "Yeah, I reconstructed the blood vessel, saved the rest of your right lung." I'm like, "That's awesome. Like, thank you."
Yeah, that's amazing.
And if it was another hospital, like, one of those hospitals I mentioned before, they could have been like, "This is easy. Take this whole lung out. See you later." So
you went the extra mile for you.
Yeah, the quality in care is pretty substantial in Boston. Like, appreciate everything they've done. So then they had to. I went home in a lot of pain because they resected some lungs, and I took a picture of my X-ray, and then I zoom in on my phone. I'm like, wait a minute, they broke my rib.
Yeah.
So my rib is, like, fused like this. So I called the surgeon, and I was like, "Did you guys break my rib?" They go, "Yeah, we had to break your rib to take the lung out." I go, "Well, you never told me you were going to break my rib." They go, "Yeah, we had to do it." I'm like, "Yeah, but you never told me."
Yeah.
So it was like, all right, so that's why it hurt so much, is they broke the rib, because they had to take I mean, the lung portion was so big they had to break it and bend it and pull it out. I'm like, all right, I get it, but I just was not aware of that until after the fact.
Yeah.
So then I went 2 weeks later for a follow-up because it was a substantial surgery. It looks like a shark bite on my back. That's what I tell the kids.
Yeah.
And went for a follow-up, did some blood work, go home, and then I get a phone call at like, 5 or 6 o'clock at night from the Boston number. I'm like, I don't think this is good. And one of the doctors was like, yeah, Jonathan, it looks like your numbers are elevated. You're going to have to come back for some more scans, but we think you have a brain tumor. I'm like, oh, okay. Just, another thing.
So now we're up to this will be the 4th diagnosis in how many years?
So it was, that was probably within 2.
Wow.
So then I went back, had brain surgery. They, cut the skin, cut a circle, take the skull off, resect the tumor that was, and it was the mixed germ cell non-seminoma tumor, which is the testicular cancer that spread from the testicular cancer, spread to the chest and lungs, spread to the brain. So brain surgery, super easy recovery because there's no muscle and there's not much up there. So it made it super easy.
Yeah.
They just put a few clips and screws, put everything back together. I was in the hospital for 2 or 3 days after and then went home.
Yeah.
And then I had to do brain radiation, which is they have this cloth that they put over your face and it's wet and then it hardens up. So when you come back, they pretty much bolt your head to the table. And they did a precise radiation. I forget what it's called.
Knife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they did that maybe 4 or 5 times. Then I went back and I had to have 10% of my left lung removed from tumor residue. So then they scope surgery that. So it was smaller portion, didn't break a rib, which was great. And then I had chemo again, outpatient chemo to be on the safe side because the cancer kept coming back. And that was probably another 6 or so visits of going to Boston for a couple hours, getting at least one chemo drug and then leaving, coming back. And, then I thought I was good. I'm like, all right, cool. Chemo's almost done. And then some more scans showed up that I had a second brain tumor in a different spot.
Wow.
Because apparently the chemo doesn't affect the brain. Certain chemos don't affect if there's a tumor.
It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah. So then I had the second brain surgery in a different spot, radiation, and then that was cancer-free after that. So towards the end of that lung resection, I was meeting up with Dr. Sweeney, my initial oncologist, and he was great. I started getting into cycling because one of my buddies, Mike, worked at a bike shop. And I'm like, well, if I can't go back to work, I might as well, do cardio. So let's get on a bike. So I bought a bike for $1,000, whole spandex kit and everything, ready to rock. And I learned a lot. He's been to a lot of fit schools and trek schools all over the country. So I'm riding. He's like, oh, you want to raise your seat a little bit? You want to do this? You want to stay light and efficient? And so I fell in love with cycling. I'm like, every time we went out, we would ride 20, 30, 40 miles. And I'm like, this is great. You could push yourself hard. You could have a good ride, or you could just kind of chill and spin and keep it light. And you get to see a lot of the state, which is pretty cool, back roads and everything. And I mentioned that to Dr. Sweeney when I saw him. And he goes, oh, are you doing the Pan Mass Challenge? I'm like, no, what's that? He said, oh, it's a 197-mile bicycle ride from Sturbridge, Massachusetts, all the way to Provincetown in 2 days. And it raises money for Dana Farber. I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to go on his team, even though he offered. Now there's Team Shamit, which is a big team. And I was like, I want this to be my thing. So I was sitting in the cruiser and I'm trying to think of names, and I'm like, it just came to me, Thin Blue Ride. Thin Blue Line for cops, ride because we're riding bikes. I'm like, that's awesome.
Love the name.
Yeah.
Absolutely love the name.
And I'm like, I never come up with good names. So I came up with that. I'm like, I love it. A couple of people from work signed up, and they weren't cyclists. And my buddy Eric wasn't a cyclist. So everyone saw me and was like,
You inspired
well,
him.
if JD's going to do it, like, let's do this. So it's kind of like the, Bad News Bears, like we're learning how to clip in and fall over.
Oh,
and
yeah.
drink our water bottles with one hand as we're riding. Like I put on 1,200 miles in like 3 months.
Wow.
Because I remember every time, it was kind of cool. We had our team picture and of like Mike, Ange, me, Eric, and they photocopied our picture and put it where we keep our cruiser keys. And every day I would come in, I would write down my miles on that. And I'm like, I'm going to fill this thing up. And I didn't want to ride more than 50 miles.
At a stretch, you mean?
Yeah, because I wanted it to be a hard ride. Like, what's the sense in riding 110 miles, like the Pan Mass, 110 miles in one day? Who cares if you do that 5 times before it? It's better if you've never done it before.
It's true. That is true.
So I this year saw the beginning of it for the first time. I live in Sturbridge.
Oh, it's unreal.
And the crazy thing is, I didn't know what was even going on.
Yeah.
And I thought I was making an early morning Walmart run, but that was stopped, and I basically parked my car. And you think in the beginning of a race, you'd have a little flat or go down a hill. You're going up a hill like this to start the race, and I already see people walking their bikes up. That's to start the race.
The one off for 20 when you take a right up there. Yeah, that one's pretty steep. Does
that test your will right away?
Yeah. I mean, the coolest part is my oncologist is like, look, you got to cheat a little bit. Because everybody's it's a Sturbridge Host Hotel is where it usually started. And then you go through this narrow official starting line. But then there's also like 200 people like on Route 20 already. Yeah. I think we're at like the whatever hotel or whatever business was out there. Like so many people, he's like, JD, get over here. Because like, you don't want to fall over in the beginning of the race and screw up your ride. Yeah. And the difference is only like 30 yards probably. So we started on Route 20 and you got the sun coming up and it's a little chilly and you're like, it's going to be hot later. So you just start cruising and you're like, this is awesome, doing about 20 miles an hour down Route 20. And then you get up to that intersection, you take a right, and then you're like, woof. This is tough. But the cool thing about the Pan Mass, our first year is like, we were raising money for Dana Farber. I'm like, these people saved my life. Let's, give back. And we don't have corporate sponsors. We don't have like any of that stuff. We'll match your donations. We started making T-shirts with Thin Blue Ride with Pan Mass logo, and then we came up with a Thin Blue Ride flag, like the Thin Blue Line American flag. And I don't know if the first year I had it, but then I kind of added the logo, like never stop fighting. And that's kind of been like my mantra all the way through is like, don't give up. And so we sold T-shirts. We ended up raising $26,000.
Wow.
With just 4 riders.
With just 4 riders.
Yeah. And it was a lot of, some like local news stories picked up my story. And then the Pan Mass actually picked up my story on WBZ. And they followed me around for, like, I was on the bike. I did the whole cancer story with them. I went to Dana Farber in Boston. And it was a cool, 2-minute story they aired on Channel 5 News. And they showed that during the opening ceremony, like on live TV in front of like thousands of people. So I was like one of the, 3 featured
riders.
The cool thing on top of that was my 1 year cancer free.
That's fantastic. You couldn't have played that any better than that.
I was like, this is my friggin' weekend.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Could you ever have imagined you talk about challenge after heartbreaks, one after another, that a year later you're doing a race that you really have to do a gut check and decide whether or not you can even do something like that.
Yeah.
But when you're riding, how did it feel knowing that you were cancer-free for a year and doing it? What's in your mind?
I mean, it felt great because you have 5,000 or 6,000 riders. Everybody's there for cancer support, right? Whether they have cancer, whether they're fighting for somebody with cancer. That, like, you want to cry, just watch the Pan Mass go by. You see a guy on a tandem bicycle with a picture of his wife on the back seat, and he's like, pulling that by himself. Or midday before the lunch stop, and I'm sucking wind with my half lung, pity party for myself, like, oh, this is tough. And then a dude with one leg is pedaling like past me.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, time to suck it up. And I will never, forget that. It's just like, and that guy rides every year, and sometimes he has his prosthetic, sometimes he doesn't. And I'm like, how many times did he fall?
Right.
Before being like, yeah, I could like ride with one leg and, get it done. Like 200 miles. Like,
it's crazy to me.
Well,
it's nuts.
But it says a lot about you and your character. I mean, you have been to hell back. You just keep going back and forth. And you're looking at the obstacles that others are going for. And you're almost like, you don't feel sorry for yourself, which is...
No. I mean, I feel like it's happened. It happens. But it's okay, let's bottle it up and put that over here. Like, sometimes, like, my wife's like, all right, quit having a pity party. And I'm like,
keep you
honest.
honest.
All right, yeah, you're right. All right, let's go. And then just figure it out and on with the next. Because that, like we were talking before, that negative energy feeds off of negative energy. If you're putting in positive, you're going to get back positive. So I think I've realized that more recently, but looking back, it's like, if you're going to feel bad for yourself, it's going to be a hard ride. And if you're like, hey, it could be worse. Like, we were in Iraq, we were down to 1 MRE a day, 1 bottle of water, 1 to shower, 1 to shave, and 1 to drink. And then I'm like, yeah, that wasn't great. But then there's dudes in Baghdad doing hand-to-hand combat. I'm like, right. That's a lot worse than what I'm going through right now.
Sure.
Like, doing 16, 20-hour missions, like, it's...
What do you attribute your positive mindset to? Like, mental toughness is there for sure, like, for everything you've done. But one thing I'm noticing now is that you have this positive mindset going through all this adversity to get through and try to eke out something of significance, even though you have all these setbacks. So how do you keep your head kind of in a positive space?
I think what it is in everything bad, there's still a little bit of good. Like, no matter what it is. You just got to find that good. Because without that, you're defeated, right? Like, I think being early 20s, being a soldier, and then seeing some really bad stuff, it puts stuff in perspective when you come home and there's somebody in a supermarket upset about a coupon that doesn't work. And you're like, bro,
yeah, right.
have you been outside of the U.S.? Have you seen how other people are living? Like, it's, it puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I've always liked traveling, is because it's like there's a lot, like, if you leave these borders and go somewhere, go to China, go wherever, go to the Middle East, and you're like, this is different. This is how people are living. It's very...
Yeah, we tend to be like in an echo chamber here,
100%.
And that echo chamber just keeps, echoing around. And until you step out, you don't get the perspective like you're saying. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, I even think, like, you find out you're in a room 8 hours a day, you're doing your treatment, and you want a bike.
Yeah.
You're already in first of all, that's an outlet.
Yeah.
But you're already, that shows you're not giving up right there.
Yeah.
You have this battle in front of you. You're not going to just sit there and it's incredible in what you show. You've just taught so many great lessons. What you've taught us is
fascinating.
Yeah. First of all, you're very proactive. You want to make sure you get, a second opinion, but also there's no quit in you. And you just, like, people say, pull up your bootstraps. You were continuously pulling up, and you just you tackled it, and you're here, and now you're giving back to cancer research. You have an amazing charity.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the charity a little bit now.
Yeah. I just want to go back 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it wasn't like it was a lot of, the positive stuff. But then, like, towards the end of that, like, it was dark. I was just like, if I get diagnosed again, I'm going to, like, I'm done. Like, I'm just checking out. And I think that was something that, I don't know if, a lot of cancer diagnosis is different. And as far as, like, trying to, end the inevitable, I'm like, I'm sick of being sick. Like, it's been years. Like I've been a cop 18 years. I've been sick for 8.
Yeah.
Like, and that's diagnosed 8. Like I ran the Falmouth Road Race, and I suck at running, but I ran with Tarantino Foundation, and I was like, all right, I'm going to run this thing. And I ran, and I've never ran that far. And I pushed, and whatever my time was, like, I felt like physically ill when I was done. And I go, I've never done anything physical where I've felt like sick. Like I know my body, like achy muscles, achy bones, like immediately I'm like, this is like the flu or something. Little did I know I had, on to the next thing. I was diagnosed with leukemia, but I didn't even know it at that time. So that was months before.
Wow.
And so even again before that, that's why it's like know your body, know what feels good.
So wait a minute. You just
sorry.
Well,
I jumped ahead.
I think I missed something here, right? So
yeah.
There was no end. It just.
So we went through testicular cancer, a lymph node dissection.
Yep.
Then metastasis to lungs, metastasis to brain, all of those things. And now we're coming up with another diagnosis of leukemia on top.
Yeah. So I had 10 procedures in 3 years for the testicular. Then I was 7 years cancer-free. And I remember I ended up getting on the SWAT team, getting on as one of the snipers, which was so much fun. Got to learn a lot. Shooting's a blast. So, get to do stuff you love. You never work a day in your life, so doing that stuff was awesome. I remember 2020 going to the sniper range, and I was dropping some weight, and my wife was like, you should go to the doctors. And I'm like, no, I switched jobs. I was working emergency operations, which was like full-time SWAT.
This is 2020?
Yeah.
So COVID year.
Yeah. So 2020, I go from working a couple of years, like full-time SWAT on day shift, which is we just go to the fun calls, like the guy with a gun, guy with a knife, guy on the roof trying to jump, like, hey, call SWAT.
Yeah.
So we would do that. And then I transferred over to the mounted unit with the horses. And we were doing a lot. It's basically barn work, like put on some music, do some barn work. A couple of guys put your uniform on, go patrol in the city. Like it was fun. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm dropping weight because I'm, working.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, it's probably something else. So do some blood work, go to the sniper range. I'm waiting for someone with the key to open the gate. Get a call from the doctor. Jonathan Daige, your white blood cell count is like 80,000. It should be like 5,000. I'm like, oh, okay. What does that mean? Like, I think you have leukemia. I'm like, oh, awesome. Like, let me let this digest for a minute. And then I just remember sitting in my Jeep, and it was just like so drained that I'm like, it's back. So called my wife, and I'm like trying to get it out, like, hey, like I got cancer. And then she's like, all right, we'll figure it out. I'm going to go meet up with him, basically it's a rare cancer, which obviously like I'll get the rarest cancer there is because just the type of guy I am.
Yeah.
So, phone calls back and forth, and then go to the sniper range, which is like the best therapy. Like, yeah, go shoot some guns. Like,
yeah,
and that honestly helped. Like, I enjoy it. I was with my buddies. We're a tight group, and we're just shoot some rounds and be like, all right, let's figure this out now. So Kelly called me. So I have 2 stepkids, Max and Vivi. And at the time, Kelly called me and goes, Max has COVID. So I get diagnosed with cancer, and I couldn't go home to see my family.
Man.
And luckily, my wife travels for work, so she was like, hey, I get some hotel points, like, go stay at the AC hotel.
Yeah.
So I literally called, like, all my boys. I'm like, dude, meet me at the AC hotel. We're going to have a couple old fashions.
Yeah, it's going to be a bender weekend, man.
And I'm just so stayed there for a couple days. Then I called my buddy Brian, who lives up in, you guys are like this, lives up in New Hampshire. And I'm like, dude, I just got diagnosed with cancer again. I need to climb a mountain.
Of course you do.
Well, you found the right place, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So drove up to his place. Went we ended up hiking Mount Chikora. And,
Oh, yeah.
You know, asking, like, he's in the military too, asking a bunch of questions and just having fun. And then, just so then I was up there with him for a couple of days. So this was like a week later almost. And Kelly, we're talking, and she's like, I have COVID. So Max had COVID, Kelly had COVID, and Vivi, she didn't get COVID. Maybe she was patient 1 in 2019 when they went to Disney or something, but she didn't get it. So I had to wait like over 2 weeks to go home.
Wow. And
Like
you have all of this brewing in your head that you haven't been able to be around your people.
Yeah.
That's like something, man.
Yeah, and there's a picture of us like Thanksgiving in the house in Worcester. I'm on the deck, and then you get the screen door, and Kelly's inside with the kids, and we're having Thanksgiving dinner.
Well,
What crazy time that was, too, though.
It was
I mean,
nuts.
it's just nuts.
let's talk about Kelly, the strength, and talk about her role. In
Yeah.
your
I mean,
support system.
she's like the best partner to have. She will. I want to say like there's. I mean, I don't want to swear, but like, no bullcrap about it. Like, she's just like, all right, let's figure it out, and totally there, totally supportive. Anytime I go to get blood work, she's like, I'm coming with you, and I'm like, no, and then she's like, all right, your mom's going with you. But it's like,
So she checks you.
but yeah, exactly, it keeps me in check. And you know, again too, she's like super supportive of everything I do, and also being cognizant of having leukemia now, like I'm living with it, but I'm also trying to show that like, yeah, I can work out every day. I can go to jiu-jitsu. I can shoot. I can ride my bike. I can ski. But since then, which I haven't gotten into yet, my baseline has changed. So I started taking leukemia meds. I started taking the Sprycel drug, which it was probably twice a day that I was taking it. And I had bone pain in my legs, which was not fun at all. But I'm like, hey, the pill's working. That's why it's painful, so deal with it. Then we went on a family vacation, 40th birthday. We went on a surf trip to Puerto Rico, and we were with our friends, AC and Tracy, and their kids. And, of course, the boys are playing football on the beach, and it's the dads against the kids. And I'm like, man, I'm getting gassed. And I'm like, something's up. I'm like, is this what 40 feels like?
Yeah, well.
And I noticed that too when I get home. I'm like, this is weird. Like, this isn't me. Like, every time I work out, I warm up with a half-mile run, and then I get into, like, stretching and doing weight. You know, typical, like, I do the Softly workout, which is pretty standard, like, lifting stuff. And I was like, my cardio is trash right now. So I went to the pulmonologist. They changed my meds. I changed from Sprycel to Tasigna, and then I went to my pulmonologist, and I'm like, you know, something's wrong. They hooked me up to an O2 sensor, and they go, we're going to have you go through a stress test. So we want you to walk up and down the hall. And I'm like, I'm not walking up and down the hall. I go, can I run the stairs?
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, I guess you could run the stairs. So I walked down 3 flights, jogged up, ran down, ran up, like not sprinting, just ran down, ran up, I think 2 or 3 times. O2 level was at like 87.
Oh, my God.
And she's like,
Wow.
That's not good.
Yeah.
So we didn't know if it was my lungs, if it was my heart.
Red cells, too.
Yeah. So it was kind of all over the place. Like, let's get this figured out. Like, here's a problem. Let's figure it out. Like, my life story. So I had EKG, I had heart tests, I had stress tests, I had breath tests. I had a stress test where the procedure was supposed to take a half an hour at Mass General, where they open up my arterial line and they run a line into the heart. It's got like a little balloon on it, I guess, that gets the blood when it's coming in and reads how much oxygen is going into your heart. So they did this procedure. It was supposed to take a half an hour. It was over 45 minutes. And then I hear him say, let's get a stitch. And I'm like, I don't remember there being a stitch. And I guess my arteries were super tight, which is like uncommon. So it just made it worse. And I was laying on the hospital bed, and I had this like agonal noise when they were pushing this thing down. I'm like, this is not right, but I don't mind the medical stuff, so I'm just thinking to myself like, okay, they're putting this in, it's going here, like trying to walk myself through it to stay calm. And then it got to one point, the nurse just came over, and I'm like, this is hurt, and she held my hand, and I'm just like, this sucks right now. This is one of the worst things I've had to deal with out of all my surgeries. Okay, this is the worst experience I've ever had under a knife, and all it was running a line to my heart, which again has risk, right?
Yeah.
Like anytime I went under the knife, it's like sign this piece of paper saying, that something could happen, you could die, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to know it anyways, so sign it. What's the other option? Not to go through surgery and have it grow and
kill you anyway.
So, surgery was great. You pass out, you wake up, it's over, and then it's recover. Chemo was the opposite. Chemo is you get chemo, you just feel like crap, feel worse, and then your body has to detox it all out. So, yeah, and I remember they were saying they were going to wheel me out after the procedure, grab Kelly, and then go into the room to do the test. They wheeled me right by Kelly. They walked over to her, and her heart dropped. She was terrified. She's like, I don't know what they were doing. And something was wrong, but like, I go, you said it was going to be half an hour. It was, I want to say it was closer to an hour. And they're like, no, it was fine. It was just the arteries. I'm like, a machine broke, and they talked about bringing a tech up. And then the other thing where they had to stitch, I'm like, this is nuts. So after that, they wheeled me to a room, and they had to do arterial lines in my wrist, which I go, have you done this a lot? And the woman's like, yes. I'm like, all right, good, because the last time this happened, like they had to prick me like 5 times. And it's not like a IV to grab the vein where it's like a little pinch. It's like a little more, it's a bigger gauge needle. It's deeper. Missed, switch hands, missed. And I'm just like, I was fasting, so I was irritable and drained. I didn't have any, volume to my veins or body or anything. They finally got it. And then they put me on a stationary bike, and they have an x-ray machine go up to my chest. And then they put this like snorkel thing in my mouth. And I was like, kind of like the crucifixion stance with my arms out. So, and then I had to pedal the bike. So I was breathing through this thing. They're taking x-rays. They're drawing blood as I'm doing this. And every minute the bike pedals would get harder. And what that was doing is increasing the, lactic threshold and trying to see what the blood was doing. And they would bring it to this little window and test the blood like as it happened, like from the heart, from the arteries. And the only downside to that was I got like 8 minutes in before I had to stop. And I was going as hard as I could. My legs were pumping, and it ended, and they were like, oh, your O2 levels only dropped to like 95.
So you're like, what the heck?
And I'm like, yeah, but I go, that was like my feet through the mud. I go, I could get on a stationary bike, spin faster at a high rate at like, say like 95 RPMs. I could do that, and after 20 minutes, that would go down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they didn't do like an FTP test. They just they did a ramp test.
Yeah.
And the ramp test made you hit the wall too fast to get the cardiac reserve up.
And this whole thing, like, so they were like, all right, your heart function is normal. And I'm like, I'm glad to hear my heart's normal, but I still want to figure out what's going on. And all these doctors are like, you're getting older, and you had your lung resections. And I'm like, yeah, but 2018, so I had my lung resection in 2015. 2018, I was going through a cycling magazine, and it said top 10 hardest bike climbs in the world. And one of them was Mount Washington in New Hampshire. So I signed up for the race.
Oh, yeah.
And I ended up doing that race. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
8 miles.
8 miles up.
Yeah.
It took me 1 hour and 52 minutes. I had a heart rate monitor with my Garmin. I wanted to do it to see if I could do it. I wasn't doing it to race because I was just like, hardest climb in the world. I was cycling a lot. I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah.
My average heart rate for 1 hour and 52 minutes was 182.
Wow. Wow.
That's an intense workout.
Yeah.
for sure.
I stopped once, and then I looked because they don't have switchbacks. It's just
up.
It's just like up.
Yeah.
And then I remember turning a corner and just seeing a long stretch. I'm like, I need a minute.
Now, if you drive your car up Mount Washington, do you get a sticker? What do you get if you do the race?
Yeah. Well, I thought I was cool, and everyone was like, the guys on the SWAT team were like, yeah, you did it. But the year I did it, a kid did it on a unicycle. So they were like, oh, you suck.
Yeah.
But
Well, the landscape never changed.
yeah,
so-
exactly.
right.
But at the top, it is so steep. I was on the bike, like carbon road bike, like leaning, getting up. It's so steep, the front tire was coming off the ground. So you have to like lean forward. And it's great because all the family and like, they don't let you ride up unless you have a ride down. So before they start the race, all the vehicles drive up to the top, and then they double park them, triple park them, whatever. And then once they're parked, then they say go, and then the racers go, and then the cars don't go down until all the racers are done, which is kind of cool. I did Mount Washington road bike race. That was one of the hardest things I've done. And then 2019, I went to Mount Everest base camp.
Wow.
With like lung resections, the whole thing. Wow.
That was tough. So I did.
And what is that? 17,000?
Yeah, it's like over 17.6 or something.
Yeah.
But I went with a buddy on the SWAT team and his son, who's
So you hiked into base camp?
yeah, we
Did it
hiked.
take it like a week?
Yeah, I think it was 6 days. So we went to Kathmandu for a couple days, and we did the long trek. We did like kind of went counterclockwise. Some people go to base camp and back. We went to base camp, and then we went through like the Chola Pass to Gokyo.
Really? Wow.
We walked like just under 100 miles.
And then
In a week?
So
I want to say a week and a half.
And that's with altitude. And
oh my God,
that's
yeah.
insane.
Like when I'm in the Rocky Mountains at 14,000,
Oh, yeah.
I'm dizzy.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
So I got a picture on my phone. My O2 sat was 62
Lord.
at what bazaar is it? It's like one of the first places at like 12,000 feet. But I remember getting there. So day one, flying to the most dangerous airport in the world,
Yeah.
Lukla, and then we hiked 3 miles to the like hostel, whatever. We had a guide,
And there's
two
no
porters.
acclimatization at that point. I mean, you just kind of get there.
No,
right?
so
You're there.
yeah, we were there. So the first day one is just like hike 3 hours, and
Yeah.
then get to a village, and then the next day is hike like 8 hours. And when we did that 8 hours, that's when, in the beginning of the movie Everest, you see like the 2 tall bridges. Like we went over the tall bridge up to one of the villages up there. I don't know why I'm blanking on the name, but I remember getting there and being like sick as a dog. Head was pounding, and I'm in the sleeping bag. This is day 2 of the trek, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to go home and tell people like I didn't make it. I'm like, maybe I'll just fly to some island somewhere and chill out for the rest of the time. And I just took some Advil. I wanted to take altitude meds that they give you, but our guide was like, don't take them now because you're gonna rely on them. So just take some Tylenol, curled up in the sleeping bag, slept, woke up, had some dalbat, which is their like vegetarian plate. Felt like $1 million, and I'm like, all right. And I was pushing myself that first day, and I go, from here on out, I'm gonna go my pace, because like my buddy Paul, super fit dude, these porters, his son, like everyone's super like.
And they're not missing significant portions
Yeah.
of their pulmonary
not.
system. You know what I mean?
So from there on, I just kind of threw my headphones in, and I'm gonna go my pace, because it's you can't go somebody else's pace. You got to go your pace.
He's living literally at the world's apex. you
That's
know what
the
I mean?
end.
Like, that's it, man.
And you're taking what's left of that lung
Yeah.
and getting every ounce of life out of that lung, which is,
Yeah.
you think that some people would like step back and nurture it.
So then
You've pushed that to capacity.
Yeah, and then you're telling your doctors you've done all this stuff, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, you're just getting old."
And they're like, oh, you're getting old. I go, yeah, but I go, what's the outlier? The outlier is the medication I was taking.
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah, I took these crappy chemo drugs, and I took this stuff that could affect my lungs. But like from 2015 to 2020, basically, when I went to Everest, like 5 years, right? So then why the brick wall right after that?
yeah.
So that's why I was trying to be like, what is going on? Like, let's figure this out. And they're like, oh, your lungs, and, you know, your heart's fine. It's your lungs, which, you know, I could stop taking these chemo pills, but then what could happen?
Yeah.
So I've been looking more into the holistic side. I went to through Boot Campaign. They're a military nonprofit that helps vets with a lot of stuff. They sent me to North Carolina to Warrior Wellness. My buddy Elijah, who runs that, it was a lot of PT type stuff and gut cleaning stuff that his wife does, which is great because your gut health is 80% of your immune health. So get your gut squared away and you're going to do pretty well. So he had a friend who was 9/11. He was a SWAT commander down when 9/11 happened, Ron Pistino, and he's a great guy. Elijah hooked me up with Ron because he had all this lung stuff going on, and he had to retire. He had, you know, couldn't sprint anymore, couldn't do all this SWAT cool guy stuff. Retired. He went and got stem cells. He went to Mexico, and then he found this place, Dr. Joy Kong, out in California. I reached out to Dr. Joy's place, talked to Dr. Courtney, who was my doctor at the time, and Dr. Courtney heard my story, shared it with somebody else. And then I'm like, all right, let's do stem cells. They consider it a skin transplant, so they can do it in the States. Some people just think everyone's got to go to Mexico, like Joe Rogan says, but they can do stem cells, which is the mesenchymal, like the mother-daughter stem cells, and they only choose clean stuff like unvaxxed, like no COVID vaccine, mother-daughter's umbilical cord, placenta stem cells, which actively regenerate. And one of the things that they heal initially is the scar tissue in lungs, which I'm like, hey, I got plenty of scar tissue in my lungs. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Courtney wanted me, Kelly, the kids on a call. All of a sudden, we're in a waiting room. And then Dr. Courtney's like, all right, well, we'll come right back. Hold on a minute. And me and Kelly are like, what is going on? Like, I thought, you know, we're going to figure this out. Like, it's expensive. And they had like a military discount portion of it that we were going to try and go. And then we go on, and there was a bunch of people on the screen. And it was Dr. Joy, Dr. Courtney. It was this woman, Laura, and her mother, Valerie. Ron was on there, a couple other people I didn't know. And Dr. Courtney's sharing the story with the whole group. And then Laura starts talking, who I never met before. She heard my story about like the nonprofit, my cancer story. And she goes, we want to pay for your treatment.
Wow.
So this complete stranger heard my story and was like, you know, her dad was a Korean War vet, passed away from cancer, and her mother are angels. I'm like, I've never been speechless, but Kelly was on a work trip, so she was in New York City. I was sitting there with the kids, and the kids are kind of like, what's going on? I'm like, and they're like, you know, we're going to help fix Dad. So it was awesome. So I was like, all right, what next? Ended up going out to California. They covered 3 treatments. So I ended up getting stem cell treatment. They did some stuff with lasers. They did stuff with peptides. So now I'm all into peptides like BPC 157, which is awesome. TB 500, a lot of stuff that helps immune health as well. So I did that, and I felt a lot of benefit from it. I thought my goal was to come off of these chemo pills I have to take every day. That wasn't the case, but with my liver numbers were super elevated, my ALT numbers, and I stopped drinking. So I'm like, oh, maybe it'll go down. Didn't go down. I'm like, it's just these toxic pills that I have to take every day. I took stem cells. The numbers went down from like 120, which is super high, almost dangerous, down to like 50. Wow. Which is like normal.
Yeah, normal, yeah.
So on a cellular level, I benefited from it. I think I'd like to do stem cells again when I'm off medication, because I recently switched because I was having like bone pain, I switched. I was on my second meds, and for 6 months I had severe leg pain. Like I'd wake up at 3 a.m. every night, like bone pain in both legs. So much I'd have to either get on the Peloton and ride 5 or 10 miles to where the pain would go away, or I'd sit in the shower for like 45 minutes with the heat. And I finally I'm like, I don't know if it's the stem cells. I don't know if it's the peptides. I don't know if it's the drugs. I don't know if it's the there's so many variables. It's like, so I just got to cut everything out. Stem cells were done with, so they were out of my system. Stopped doing the peptides to see if it was that. Emailed my oncologist, and I'm like, I need to come off these meds. And he's been a great oncologist, but at the same time, I've told him about the leg pain, and he's like, oh, that shouldn't happen. And I'm like, yeah, but it is. And if I was pushed a little harder a while ago, maybe it wouldn't have taken so long to come off of it. Like, I was afraid to go to bed at night because I'm like, I'm going to wake up in the morning. I'm going to wake up in pain. I'm like, this sucks. Like, sleeping is such a, get an advantage where your body gets to restore itself. And waking up in pain is not
advisable. Yeah.
So I switched meds. So now when I stopped taking those meds, it was right around New Year's, because we had our friends over, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, my heart's doing some weird stuff right now. I was sitting on the couch. My resting heart rate was like 115. So my body was detoxing those pills, and I felt like crap for a couple of days, and then I felt great. And then the new pills came in, and now I've been taking the new pills. I only have to take 2 a.m, which is fine. Wait an hour to eat, and hopefully it'll be a little better. Like if my numbers get down below 0.1, it could be undetectable, and I could come off of meds. There's only a 25% chance I could come off meds, but I'll be that 25% because I'm doing all this stuff. I'm trying to, get the red light therapy, do the cold therapy, sauna, like you name it, I'm trying it. Just, what's it going to hurt?
Right.
Like,
yeah, you don't have quit in you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Unbelievable. Tell us, as we wrap up, tell us about Thin Blue Ride.
So Thin Blue Ride, we started as a cycling team, and then 2 years later, we're like, I love Dana Farber. I love donating to them. They saved my life. But my friends had a benefit from me when I was out of work. I wasn't working. I wasn't getting overtime. I wasn't getting details. I had $26,000 in copays with good insurance. Friends had a benefit. I was able to pay that off. I was able to pay some stuff off, credit cards. I'm like, that was huge, right? So I'm like, well, let's pay it forward. I go, let's start a nonprofit where I'm like, do we want to pay for credit card bills medical bills? I'm like, screw that. It doesn't go against your credit. I'm like, I tell everyone, I'm like, pay $20 a month. As long as it doesn't go to collections to another company, like give them the minimal. And what we did is we started a 501c3. We have an EIN number, thinblueride.org. We raise money. We take those funds, put them in our account. Like recently we raised $2,500 for one of our cancer warriors. I took it to the bank. I added another $2,500 to that, wrote a check for $5,000. So we have the worst business model ever. We give away more than we take in.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that's what we should do. Like we've given away, we make sure they're a veteran, a first responder, or the family of. And if they have cancer, we fundraise. We either have a fundraiser or we do like an online type fundraise donation thing. Then that goes through PayPal giving or whatever platform. Thin Blue Ride gets a check. I deposit it. Then we add to those funds typically. And it's a made up number. Like if we raise, like we raised $200 for someone down in Texas. And then I'm like, let's make it 500 or let's make it 1,000 depending, and we just add to that. We've done 500, we've done 50,000. And we give it to the family and we say, and trust me, I have to convince people, especially these like Green Berets and
Yeah.
Military guys, alpha guys, like, hey, we want to help you. And they're like, no. I go, dude, and I tell them I had $26,000 in copays, and they're like, ooh, okay, maybe. But it takes convincing to be like, listen, people want to help. They don't know how. If they could throw $5 at it, if they could buy a shirt for $20 or $25 and a portion of that goes to you, like, let them help because they don't know how.
Yeah. So how can listeners help out? How can they reach out to you guys?
So we have thinblueride.org on our website. You could donate through PayPal there. You could donate. I'm going to have some fundraisers coming up. I have to get squared away on Instagram. I mean, I want to spread our network, right? Like, we've helped people in California, Florida, Texas, a bunch of families in Mass, kids, grandparents. Like, we help everybody. So, like, spread our network. Sometimes I ask for general donations and we don't get anything, but then we'll have a kid who has cancer. All of a sudden we'll get like $5,000. I'm like, all right, perfect. Because we don't have a lot of overhead, which is good. We just had a vehicle donated to us from Marty's GMC, which is huge. They're wrapping it for us, so I can't wait to see
cool.
that.
That's awesome.
And it's like, the hard work pays off. Like, if you put in good, you're going to get good back.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's, like, I don't take a salary from this. The people on our board don't take salaries from this. We do a golf tournament every year. We look for sponsors. If somebody had, like, we've done gun raffles, which Facebook hates. We've done Garmin watches, but like stuff that I think is cool. I'm like, let's raffle it, get some money. And then, especially if it's donated, we can raffle that off. And it's just nothing but a gain for a person directly or the nonprofit.
You're giving back, and with everything that you've went through, you're trying to help people going through something similar, and just giving them that time to take a little bit of pressure off of them, and it's amazing.
Well, I say money isn't the cure all, but it helps.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, it's we had a family, their car went. They had one vehicle in the family, and stay-at-home mom. The other guy was a trooper. And the motor went. They're like, all right, there's $5,000. Like, all right, let's get these guys some funds to help out.
Yeah. What kind of, I'm going to take it from you. What kind of advice would you give someone who's going through their first, diagnosis and give someone a little bit of hope? What would you tell them how to move forward?
I tell them it could always be worse, but I could also tell them that, like, put in some research, right? Like, whether it's look at the meds you're taking, look at the side effects that it could cause, look at what could counter that. Like, look at the holistic side. Like, I'm not going all holistic, but at the same time, I'm going to sleep on my grounding bed sheets and go walk around in the yard barefoot and, you know what I mean? Like, do what you can, because it's going to hurt.
Right.
And I think if I knew that during all those treatments before, because I didn't start to research it like towards the tail end of my first diagnosis and all those treatments, because like if you're on chemo, they're giving you a steroid. I was up to 230 pounds. They were filling me with so much liquid and a steroid, and the crappy taste in your mouth. I'm like, I just want to eat everything. Yeah. So there was no way I was going to be eating, sticks and leaves for a diet. During that, I was like, give me pizza, give me lobster rolls, give me steak, whatever. But the information's out there to get better. Like, I'm looking into a hyperbaric chamber that oxygenates your blood.
I just saw an ad for that on social media.
Now it's going to pop up on your phone again. But
yeah, right.
So I'm looking into that to see if I can do that, because if my lungs don't collapse and it's safe in an environment, then I'm going to buy one for my house. And the stuff isn't cheap, but at the same time, what's the alternative?
Right.
Like $26,000 in copays or $10,000 for a hyperbaric chamber.
Yep.
So I'd say do research, stay positive, and reach out to me and I'll help.
Fantastic. What do you got, Dennis?
You said it all. I mean, you have such a positive mindset, and I think you had so many times where you could have given up along the way, and you just kept pushed and pushed and pushed. You have a strong support network around you, and you didn't just take the information that you received as the final answer. You just kept looking, and you gave so much advice for the listeners, and We wish you luck in your future endeavors if you keep on paying it forward to others. And as always, it's go time.